Welcome to Analysis in Chains with Nathan and Neil.
Hi everyone, Neil here. So for our latest podcast, we have Nathan interviewing the co-founders of ULedger. ULedger work at the intersect of blockchain and data infrastructure technologies. Their software certifies the integrity of data transactions, which is essential in regulatory heavy industries such as financial and medical. ULedger can therefore streamline data certification and regulatory compliance for various companies to help reduce regulation costs. They are effectively putting to good use the key features of the blockchain such as transparency, decentralization, and the value of trust. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this interview. Take care and keep on hashing.
Now it's time for an Analysis in Chains exclusive interview. Hi everyone, Nathan here, and joining me today are ULedger's co-founders Josh McIver and Taulant Ramabaja. Now, ULedger has developed an interesting platform for managing the integrity of data on the blockchain. They've got a couple of big customers, including government entities, and we're going to talk to them a little bit about what they're doing, about how their system works, about what the big companies and the governments are looking at, and then a little bit about data integrity in general and what we should be looking out for going forward. Thanks for joining me, Josh and Taulant.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
So, Josh, I want to get a little bit into how you started this company. What was sort of the vision for data integrity on a blockchain?
Yeah, good question. So I started my career at Deloitte in their Denver office doing audit. And, one of the main jobs of an auditor is to go into a firm or entity and ascertain the integrity or accuracy of their data and issue an opinion on that. Mm-hmm. So I was just entrenched in that world for 3 or 4 years, and fast forward a few years, I got my MBA, and eventually was working at a technology startup in Utah that was looking at blockchain for a very different use case. But anyways, once I learned about the technology, I immediately saw an application to the audit world. Now, not just specifically audit, but having a mathematical, non-forgeable, trustless ledger where third parties can rely on seeing what happened to your data, in what order it happened, when it happened, who created the transactions, etc. So that's how I got into it, and it's been about 2.5 years now, and the original idea has morphed quite a bit. Taulant had a lot to do with that. The easy way to explain what we're doing is we are a blockchain overlay for a company's existing technology infrastructure. So it's a very seamless integration. It doesn't involve an overhaul of what they already have. And so far, we've had a lot of traction and success.
But I want to go over how exactly if I'm a company and I want to secure my data on the blockchain, first of all, why would I want to do that?
Well, there's a number of reasons. One I touched on briefly before is regulatory requirements or audit requirements. To be able to have this, ledger that people can trust and come into your organization and relatively quickly say, okay, this is what happened to your data. I can rely on it because it's in a distributed blockchain format, etc. So that's one, streamlining regulatory and audit requirements. The other is, there's a number of them. The other may be, if you internally need to see what happened to a transaction internally, you can easily investigate what happened and follow the life cycle of a transaction from beginning to end. There are also some security benefits. With a lot of these breaches, Equifax, for example, the bad actor will come in and cover his tracks by adjusting the audit log, and that happens, all the time. They've gotten pretty smart about doing that. Now, with a ULedger blockchain audit trail, you simply can't do that. You can't delete, you can't manipulate the log. What it would show is exactly what you tried to do to manipulate the audit log.
Now, I understand that one of the simplest ways of doing an audit trail using blockchain would be to take a snapshot of a database, hash it, and store the hash on the blockchain. ULedger strikes me as more complex than that. Could you elaborate a little on how it works?
Yeah, so maybe I can jump in there from a technical perspective. Yep. From a technical perspective, we're pretty radically different from everything else out there. So just to kind of compare and contrast, other blockchain solutions all are, and this might be a bit of a mouthful, but what we call distributed state machines. So everybody says we're a protocol, but in fact what they actually are distributed state machines. It's essentially one big computer with some sort of way of agreeing with one another on what the current state is. And that state just happens to be, as you pointed out, a hash, a snapshot of a database. We approach this very, very differently in that we are an actual protocol in the actual definition sense, where we are stateless. So there is no global single state like there is with Bitcoin or Ethereum or others. Rather, we are a protocol by which, so the protocol essentially defines how computers in a network find one another and agree with one another on the relative ordering of transactions every time they do some sort of interaction. So there is no actual sharing of data beyond the nodes with which you are interacting with. The only thing being shared globally in some sense is what we call the passage of time, which is an emergent phenomena. People interested can read up on our paper on the cross-merkleization section somewhere. And therefore, instead of just taking snapshots in a database, what we do is that if your existing system supports some sort of transaction model, we can essentially become a layer on top of your existing system and make it possible for your data to be ordered in a relative order to everybody, all the nodes, all the blockchain data structures with whom you're interacting with. So in our system, every company using ULedger, in fact, has their own blockchain in a data structure sense. And instead of agreeing with everybody on what everybody else sees, you just agree with the people who actually care about your data, what that is. And if you need to find out whether something existed at a certain point in time, you essentially start, and this all happens in the background on a technical level, ask your neighbors when they saw something, and then you compare that witnessing of that event relative to what you have witnessed to those neighbors, and you can kind of know the relative order when that happened. So it's pretty radically different from all the other blockchain projects out there.
So would I be correct in saying you built your own consensus algorithm?
For agreement, yes, but not consensus. There is no actual consensus between nodes. The only thing that actually happens in our network is that every node essentially proves to neighboring nodes what they have witnessed in terms of events that they received, which can be transactions or can be just database events, as you pointed out. And that's really the only thing that you can actually record. Our theory is that absolute time doesn't actually exist. So all the other blockchain projects out there try to create some sort of absolute time, like global ordering, absolute ordering of events by everybody agreeing on what everybody else agrees on, because ultimately that's what consensus is. We have come to the conclusion that for many use cases, such as IoT use cases, bad network connectivity use cases, or even like interplanetary communication use cases, global time cannot exist. Rather, the only thing you can do is prove the relative order in which you have witnessed something. So we're really playing to our strengths here in terms of just proving the relative order of events in regard to when those nodes actually witness them, and only the nodes interacting with them actually care about it.
So if I understand what you're saying, this would be very useful within an organization for regulatory purposes to prove the order in which events or transactions happened?
Yes, but it's not just useful within an organization, it's also useful between organizations. The assumption here is that global ordering is really, such as in Bitcoin or Ethereum or pretty much any other blockchain out there, is really useful if you want to get rid of the issue of doublespend attacks, right? That's one of the many reasons why Bitcoin is the way it is. But what we have come to the conclusion is that in an industrial setting where most of these private chains are kind of shooting for getting into, that's not really a concern. Doublespend attacks in a legal setting, because a company is a legal entity, it is a legal problem. It's not a technical problem. So just like any other legal problem, what you actually need for that is very fast and independently provable events and facts about that, whether something happened in that fashion or not. So we essentially do not design around the doublespend problem. We only design around the independent data verification problem and independent verification of the relative order of events.
When we're thinking about areas to set up a blockchain startup and a place where you might find brilliant blockchain coders and developers and people with the knowledge to be able to build top-of-the-line cryptographic applications, Boise, Idaho doesn't really come to mind as the first place I would go to meet my talent.
Yeah, that's a very common comment that we get.
Well, I haven't moved to Idaho, at least yet, so let's see what the future brings. I'm calling in here from Kosovo, from Pristina.
So far it hasn't been an issue, but I imagine as we grow in headcount, Boise, like you said, isn't a hotbed for talent. Although we are kind of a budding tech community, I think when we are ready to grow, that will be a struggle for us. But so far, it really hasn't been an issue. It's a quick flight from Boise, almost anywhere we want to go. We can work remotely with people that need to work remotely. But yeah, so far it's been great.
In regard to talent and blockchain experts, I would say the blockchain space as well as the machine learning space, the two new cutting edge things out there, are kind of really a new movement in that the majority of the talent isn't anymore in the US. That might be because of the rest of the world is catching up, or because both technologies are something that is born online and being developed online. So there isn't really one center of gravity anymore like what Silicon Valley used to be. Rather, it's multiple centers all around the world, which I think is also one of the reasons why there's just such an influx of people traveling all around the world trying to meet one another at conferences and meetups.
And is that how you guys met, at a conference?
It was interesting. So Taulant and I got put in touch through a mutual friend. This friend, I told him my idea, and he said, well, you have to talk to Taulant. This would be a perfect project for Taulant. And so I called up Taulant. We had a few meetings, and then I actually flew him out to Idaho, and we met for, what was it, Taulant, like a week and a half, and just went through the idea, analyzed it, poked holes in it, and eventually we came to what now is ULedger.
And now you guys are working together and doing a token sale. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's a roller coaster for sure. It's been interesting to see the ecosystem evolve in just the last few months. But it's going really well, actually. So we're working with Cooley, the law firm Cooley, on our token sale, and working with guys like David Waxman and their firm. And it's been interesting. So we actually just restructured the terms of our token sale to something that we think is a little bit more realistic given the current environment. It used to be a few months ago that you saw $100 million ICO, and that was nothing outlandish,
For the good old days of 6 months ago,
yeah,
eh?
yeah, isn't it? It's crazy how fast things move along. But we decided, we don't need $100 million to do what we're trying to do. So we worked with our advisors, and we've got a couple really good ones. One, for example, is William McIver. You may know of him. Another is Lorian Newman, and they've been just fantastic in helping us lay out the terms. But basically, so we're in the seed section of our token sale right now, where we're giving 100% bonus to these early investors. And then our pre-sale and ICO, our crowd sale, will likely be at the end of Q1 of next year once we have token utility.
Tell me a bit about token utility. What do you plan to use this token for?
Maybe I should jump in there. The token utility is, again, quite different from everything else out there. Because we do not have a global state, there is no place where our token would actually reside. That has its upsides and downsides. Upside is that we can use a global platform which is specifically intended for that, such as Ethereum, which is what we're going to use for our token, in combination with a layer 2 network, such as Raiden for micropayments. That's a plan for the token in the future. What the tokens will be used for is also very interesting in that you're actually paying other nodes in the network to accept your block headers within their blockchain data structure and essentially anchor your chain towards their chain, because everybody's kind of anchoring themselves on one another in a mesh network. So you're essentially paying them to include you in there, even if you do not have performed sufficient cross-merkleization, or if you do not want to perform the cross-merkleization method. Now, you can use the entire network for free. So the closest comparison would be like you can use BitTorrent for free and use it to download and upload things. And it works just fine. But if you wanted to really quickly download something on BitTorrent, wouldn't it be great to be able to pay other nodes to send you packages in a quicker way? And that would incentivize many people to do so. The same concept applies here, where you essentially pay other nodes to more quickly prioritize your block headers to be included in their data structure. And therefore, that means that your blocks are anchored quicker to more nodes in the network. And that means that the relative ordering and immutability of your blocks and of your transactions traverses the world and the network much quicker than if you would not use the network. To make maybe a technical comparison, many people have been talking about the fee market in Bitcoin, which is an oxymoron. There is no market in Bitcoin. It's a round-based monopoly in that there's always one block creator. So by definition, that's not a market. In our case, it is an actual market in that you can anchor your blocks towards other companies' chains and therefore create this relative ordering. And you can essentially pay any number of other nodes to include you. And therefore, it's an actual market. So you would be interested in doing that if you're, let's say, a really big company and you need extremely fast immutability and relative ordering of your transactions. So any big corporation, any bigger company would be interested in using that. And when we're talking here really about seconds rather than minutes of Bitcoin level or even more so immutability.
That sounds like it's fairly technical. Do you find that people in government or people in big businesses, your main customers, have trouble understanding the need?
Well, it depends on who the entity was. For example, any Big Four accounting firm or audit firm catches on immediately, right? They see the need. Government too. When we went into the city of Boise, they immediately saw the value of data transparency and everything that comes along with blockchain. Now there are a few sectors, I should say, that really just aren't early adopters, and they're hesitating a little bit. Certain financial sectors, large banks, broker dealers, attorneys, they're all kind of they've got some concerns. Attorneys, for example, would advise any client not to use ULedger or blockchain because it could be incriminating.
So not everyone wants transparency, eh?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I guess it's a bit of a double-edged sword for a company.
Well, there's trade-offs, right? It can both be incriminating and it can save you from incrimination. And so there has been that kind of paradigm shift. But overall, what we've seen is that companies and leaders of companies and CTOs and government are all for transparency and streamlining regulation and adding the aspects of blockchain to their underlying technology. I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out just why would we make the investment? Data integrity is great, blockchain is great, but how is this going to affect my bottom line? And there's not really a clear answer for that. It really depends on the use case. But that's what's going through their heads.
So definitely a double-edged sword then.
Exactly. In fact, our very first product was applying ULedger to your email platform. So when we started ULedger and we were doing pitch events, the whole Hillary Clinton email thing was going on, which was great for us. We could go into our pitch events and say, if you use ULedger, Hillary and her team would have had this immutable, non-forgeable, trustworthy audit trail that she could have just shown whoever was looking at it, which is true. And that's, any company that's publicly traded or whoever goes through a lawsuit has to go and produce all their emails for one reason or another. So, but yeah, we would tell that to lawyers and they said that's a really good idea, but our clients we would not recommend that ever.
I bet. And that's the issue with transparency. So I guess you also have issues with companies being nervous about sharing data when they're using ULedger?
No, and that's really the beauty of it. Companies do not want to share their data with other companies unless they have to or unless it's a transaction happening between the two companies. So the only thing actually being shared outside of the companies actually interacting with one another is just block headers and in business terms, what we call audit trails. So that already creates the immutability and the relative ordering.
But yeah, from the regulatory side and the data integrity side and the security perspective, companies latch on pretty quick. And the fact that we can integrate into their existing system pretty seamlessly has been really appealing. Not only that, but as Taulant explained, we don't have to actually store or access their underlying data. And so there's not a lot to risk when you're implementing ULedger.
That said, I would really like to point out that the utility of ULedger goes way beyond data integrity. So, for example, if you're requesting a document from a website right now and you have to go to some, bureaucratic institution, the best you can do is just print it out and get it to the institution and show them, here's the document, or here's an income statement from my bank or something like that. But it's not really trustable. You cannot know whether you cashed out money right after that or something happened right after that. With ULedger, you could actually prove not just that certain piece of data, that website or document existed at that point in time, but actually the order in which that happened relative to whatever else the bureaucratic institution is asking for. So there's a lot more use cases. Anything that requires relative ordering can really be revolutionized with us.
A few weeks ago, we had blockchain partner France on the show, and we talked a little bit about how the big companies and corporates were dealing with blockchain, incorporating blockchain. How's government reacting? I mean, you've dealt with government more than anyone else I've talked to so far.
Well, with the city of Boise, whom we're working with, they've been very open and excited about the potential of blockchain. And, right now we're in the middle of implementing our technology within their utilities department. And that's just a starting point. From there, it'll expand, hopefully to the entire city. But they've been very anxious to move forward. They've been very engaging when we meet with them. So, I can't really talk for other government entities, but the city of Boise has been first movers in the space.
So, going forward, what sort of progression do you expect for governments to be adopting blockchain technology?
Yeah, I see it being more municipal, city governments, and then state, and then federal. I just think they have more autonomy to make those decisions rather than the federal government, which could take a long time to do. But I do see blockchain spreading to the federal government eventually.
And Taulant, I was hoping to ask you, what areas do you think will be the first to adopt this sort of data integrity layer? Or which should we be looking for in the next 6 months, year, 5 years?
I think it's going to start with just data integrity. We've all seen the Equifax stuff in the news. So very much replacement of traditional logging systems with ULedger. And then going from there, we'll probably see the first instances of multiple companies using both ULedger to interact with one another. Hopefully that will then create a network effect as we anticipate, and then we'll actually see logic on top of that independently verifiable data and ordering, which then can lead to all kinds of really, really interesting stuff. Like actual applications interacting with one another in an independently verifiable manner. But that's probably still a little bit off until more companies adopt it.
All right. Well, thank you, Josh, for joining me. Thank you, Taulant, for joining me. Their company is ULedger, and the URL is uledger.co. They're having their token pre-sale and hopefully the ICO early next year. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you for listening to this Analysis in Chains exclusive interview.